Okay, we looked back again at Colossians 2 and just a number of different things that talked about these. We want to go on now. So if you would turn to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24. And we will, first thing I want to do is I'll turn to Matthew 24. This chapter, by the way, I am not saying that I know for certain, because I do not know for certain. I can't. That this is not talking about the future of now. I mean, can God go, okay, I said that this way, and it happened this way, but I'm going to do it again using the same words? He can't. I don't know. But Matthew chapter 24, we'll start with verse 1. Jesus came out from the temple, was going away with his disciples, came up to the point to point out the temple buildings to him, and he said, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down." As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, which had been across the valley and looking back into Jerusalem, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things happen?" What things? Well, what he just said, that these stones will be torn down. "And what will be the sign of your coming?" The word there for coming it doesn't mean just coming. It means a movement. And it can be going or coming. It just means somebody moving. They decided to make it that way. And then, so that's the second question. And the third question is the end of the age. Now, the King James translate that wrongly, as the end of the world, except the word in the Greek is aeon, which is not the word cosmos, cosmos being the word for world, and the word aeon being the word for age. And so there are three questions that Jesus answers them. If you read it that, okay, this is the end of the world, then you're going, wow, you look at all this. Bad things happening. Well, bad things happen. I don't know if you've noticed, but anyway, he's answering three specific questions. And the first one is, when are these walls going to be torn down like this? No stone left on top of another. That was going to happen in 70 AD when the Romans came in, killed 1 million Jews inside the walls of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. The place was so bad that women were eating their children. It was bad stuff. That was in 70 AD. But what went along with this is that the sign of his coming and the end of the age was the end when the temple was destroyed at that time, came the end of an age. And the end of that age was the end of the age where, if you want to call it Judaism, where they had the temple, they no longer were able to do any of the temple services, anything else. Why? The temple was gone. And it's been gone for 2,000 years, which is very interesting. Why didn't the Jews ever go back and rebuild it? Right now they own the place. And they're strong enough, certainly, to do it, but they've never rebuilt the temple. Now, a whole lot of people say, biblically, they're going to rebuild the temple. I've looked at the scriptures a number of times, and I think their arguments are laughable. But we won't go into that right now. That's not the task here. Therefore, it can't be our jurisdiction. So, anyway, chapter 24 and 25 are about not the end of the world, but they're about the end of this particular age. And we're going to look, we're going to start in verse 4 and 5, and 6 and 7. You'll be hearing wars and there are going to be false Christs. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. How about that? Something like the kingdom of heaven going against the kingdom of darkness. Verse 8, these are merely the beginning of birth pangs. They will deliver you to tribulation. That, by the way, it's not the Great Tribulation. It just says tribulation. You're going to get in trouble here. And they're going to kill you. You're going to be hated by the nations. It says peoples, people groups, because of my name. Many will fall away. Many false prophets will come. Verse 12, lawlessness is increased. The word in the Greek is anomia, which is no law, lawless, not iniquity. Because lawlessness increased, most people's love will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And he says, the good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the peoples, then the end will come. The abomination of desolation, that happened. We're not going to stop and talk about it now. We've got other videos and other teachings. And by the way, this is not describing the rapture. This is simply talking about things that happened and hoping that it wasn't going to be on the Sabbath and in the winter. And it goes on. Again, false Christ coming up, false signs and wonders. Wait a second, he's here, don't believe it. And then we'll start in verse 28, getting it into a little more detail. Now we've kind of set up the way that it works. Verse 28, wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. And the word for vulture here in the Greek can also be the word for eagle. It is the word for eagle. And they use them the same here. And so the thing is that when we talk about this, in verse 15, if you look, the abomination of desolation, the literal is the desolation, or the abomination that makes desolate. The abomination that makes desolate. And before they completely destroyed the temple, Titus, the general, had his men, all of them bring in, not all of them, but the head of the army groups, and each one that brought in the symbol of Rome, which was an eagle. And they came into the temple, and they desecrated the temple. And each one represented a cohort of killing machines, and they came in and swearing allegiance to Rome, and did bad things in the temple, then destroyed it, the whole thing. And so this can be vultures. We certainly know that where corpses are, vultures show up, but so do eagles, especially, well, I don't know all of them, but the bald eagle, the caracara, which is the Mexican eagle, they call it, and they're both of them will eat carrion quite readily. When we were coming back from Big Bend one time, there was a golden eagle, and this is where I found out the difference between a golden eagle and a vulture. We could see this bird. It was at a roadkill, and I kept waiting for the thing to take off, and I was going, that doesn't look like a normal vulture. Well, as we got closer, and we're getting really close, the wings come up, and if it's a vulture, he just is trying to get into the air. Poor thing, I'm having a difficult time here. This thing lifts these massive wings up and pumped, and what was interesting, the difference between them is that the roadkill went with the eagle. He picked it up and flew off with it. I don't know what it was, but it was big. And the vulture can't do that. It doesn't have strong enough wings or strong enough talons. But the eagle, this was not a big deal to him. He just picked it up and left. Anyway, either way, they eat carrion. They're not above such things. I usually don't do that. Just want to bring that up. Verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days. Now, I'm going to start fussing immediately because the word in the Greek here is for the word immediately after. The word there is the Greek word meta. And the Greek word meta has come to mean, we often use it now as a prefix, and it is used to mean before, or rather it's used after, after these days, after, and so we see it as we see it translated here. But I'm afraid that's not the best of the translations. Back at the time of the writing of this especially, the Greek word did not mean after. It meant what we use it for some, but what it meant back in most of the time was among. In those days. In what days? The days he's been describing. What were the days? The days when the temple was going to be flat. And he gave a really incredible description of these things in his discourse to his disciples. And when he did this, he did not say, and these things are going to happen, and then later on. This is one of the big deals is people have gone, oh, all this stuff is later on, it's in the future. And the Bible does not say that. It actually says, if we look immediately among those days, within the tribulation of those days. In other words, of the siege of Jerusalem and all of these people dying, and immediately during the tribulation of those days, and here's where it gets kind of cool, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky. And if we talked about something similar to this recently, and these words were used almost exactly the same picture. Anybody remember where we were looking? Yeah. Keep your fingers where you got them right now. Turn to Revelation chapter 12. Ms. Davis, will you read that for us?
What am I reading? Which part?
The right part.
Mm-hmm.
Not the left. Let's see, where is that? That's good. I can't find it now. Oh, how about verse 1?
And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. And his heads were on his heads were 7 diadems. And his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven, and they threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God, so that she might be nourished for 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. And the dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, and the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them before our God day and night.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Now, I'm glad that she went on into verse 10, because this we know, the picture we're seeing is the life, birth, burial, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. And then in verse 10, we see all this has gone on, and the words are now. Now. Not future, now, the salvation. Now, we'll all be glad about the salvation, but one of the reasons that we're going to read this whole thing is because it doesn't just say, now the salvation, it says, now the power. The power. Now the kingdom of our God. Now the authority of his Christ have come. It's not just, and the church talks about what? You got to get saved. We're concerned about your salvation. I'm all for it. Okay, it's got my vote. But the problem is that we do not talk about the other aspects of this. That his kingdom, it's not, well, when kingdoms come. The kingdom is here. The kingdom came 2,000 years ago. The king just completely turned Rome upside down. Not just the kingdom, but the authority. And this in many ways is what we're talking about, folks. We do not believe that there are powers, principalities, and rulers. We don't even believe in Satan anymore. We don't believe in demons. We don't believe in all sorts of things because we're too sophisticated for that. And therefore, we don't believe the kingdom of our Christ has come. We don't believe we have authority over some of these issues. And we don't believe that his power will do anything. And these things are given to us, not just salvation. Now the salvation. We've got salvation. Great, good. But the other things are there for us too. In fact, they're not there for our convenience. They're there for the fact we've been called to war. But we don't talk about that. We've been called to war. And I wanted to go and look back at the picture though real quickly. Verse 1, a great sign in heaven, woman clothed with sun, moon under her feet, on her head a crown of 12 stars. We go back to verse 29. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, the powers of the heaven will be shaken. What we're seeing here, this is a picture. When we look at a picture, the Hebrews would use this description of Israel as a woman with the sun at her head and the moon that was there too, and also stars around her. So we see this. But we also see that in this time, verse 9, because of this war going on, and we see the serpent who's called the devil and Satan who deceives he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with them, or with him. And the fact that we're seeing when we look at this, we've already been talking about the powers, the principalities, and rulers. But one of the ways this is also spoken is that when it says the stars. Now, we see, why would we have this picture in verse 29? During the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light. We can say that that's going to happen in the future. It might be. I don't know. I've not been there and come back. But what this is talking about is that this is what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not getting the word I'm looking for. The decrease of the light that the Jews had been putting out. The decrease of that religion, of the decrease in the light of the sun from Judaism, the decrease in the light of the moon, and the stars falling from heaven. When it goes on, I want you to look at the last phrase in verse 29. What's it talking about? Come on, take a look at it. Read it out loud. And the stars will fall from the heaven, and what? Out loud, everybody.
The powers of the heavens.
That's not just Mrs. Davis. Everybody.
The powers of the heavens will be shaken.
What in the world is he talking about? We've been talking about it. These are powers. These are powers in heaven. Well, what is it? It's the rulers, the authorities, if we go back to Colossians 1, in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, rulers or authorities. There it is. And when we see in Matthew 24, the stars will fall from the sky, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. What happened during the time of this tribulation? At the time that Yeshua was crucified, during that time, and that was great tribulation, but at that time, and we can go and try to find it, but we know about the time that he died, what happened to the sun? It was darkened. It was darkened. And we see part of that in, I guess, come to fruition even right there. But when we're talking about the powers of the heavens will be shaken, the stars will fall from the sky, this was the hosts of heaven with Satan, and they were cast out of heaven. Now, this is important that we understand this. The only real good argument I had with my former boss, and I let him win because it wasn't worth the trouble to fight. But did Satan have the authority to accuse us before God? And I said, that's ridiculous. It can't be. Jesus has made at one with all of the things in heaven that are now on earth, and we're in that. And the blood is around that, and his flesh is around that. We either are Christians or we're not. Is this true? Are you saved or are you not? Are you free from Satan? And this is what it's talking about. He cannot go before Satan or before God. Satan cannot go before God and accuse us. He will accuse us one to another, gets our mouths going, our tongues, our judgmental spirit, but he cannot do it before God anymore. And if we go on, what we see here, then the sign of the Son of Man, we're going to try about to worry about that one, will appear. And I want to go on in verse, Son of Man coming or moving with the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Verse 31, Matthew 24. He will send forth his angels with a great trumpet and gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now stop a second. Now we look at this one and we go, glory, glory, hallelujah. And we go, wow, one of these days, see, God's going to send out the angels and he's going to go and reap. Except we look at what's going on. He's talking about the fall of Jerusalem and the attack of Rome here. And this was also the end of Judaism as they knew it. It was over. But it's the beginning of something else. That beginning of something else was the kingdom of our God. And with that kingdom, what happened was what we are reading about is the beginning of evangelism, the beginning of the spread of Christianity into the world. And all he's doing is saying it's going to happen. Okay? And if we look, he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet. They will gather his elect together from the four winds, one of the sky to the other. Nowhere does it say he's gathering together so that he can have the great white throne judgment. That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is at a very specific time here in history. Jesus has died, resurrected, and taken us with him into the heavenlies. He has defeated the powers, the principalities, and rulers that used to go, you didn't have a chance to, they were over you. You were enslaved to them, but you're not anymore. And now you can go with a great trumpet. You can go and, again, this is one of the Feast of Trumpets. The Feast of Trumpets was blown. All it said was, it's a day of blowing. Why? Well, there were two good reasons they blew trumpets. One was at the approach of the king. The king's coming, and boy, the trumpets were blowing. And the other one was when the king had won a great victory. Well, we have both of them inside us. Jesus has done these things. And he has defeated, as we've talked about, the powers, principalities, rulers, authorities in heaven. He disarmed them because they did not have that writ of accusation against us anymore. I know we're going off too fast, but this is a lot of really good stuff. This is amazing because it suddenly makes sense. Of course, jurisdiction had they owned us. Oh, of course, jurisdiction had they lost us. And worse than that, the one that defeated them now lives inside me. And I can look at them, and with his authority, with his power, I can go, no, you're not going to do that. This is a bit of a change in the way things have gone on. Miss Davis, what do you have to allow in this?
Nothing.
Nothing? Nothing.
I do. I'll just
See,
take one verse.
this is the stuff I have to put up with.
First Peter talks about it says, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven after angels and authorities and powers had been subjected to him. You probably have that verse down to talk about, but yeah, everything was subjected to him.
Thanks a lot.
Sorry, did you have it listed?
Not anymore. It's ruined. We'll get around to it. I'll make you talk about it, okay? All right. We'll move on from this. Which, let me add one other thing. In my notes here, it says, not that this is not the end times, but rather the beginning of Christian evangelism. My next point is, which I might add here, we stupidly leave out the ministry of our greatest allies. We don't talk about angels. Why? Well, you're not supposed to talk about angels. Where's that? We see people, we know this, that people would begin to brag about how many times they had seen angels or things like that. That's not what studying about angels is about. That's not what knowing about the kingdom of God is about. Guess who's in the kingdom of God with us? 2/3 of the good guys. Only 1/3 of them got knocked out. 2/3 of the good guys are with us, and they are greater in might and power than we are. Okay? And we don't have the authority to tell them to do something, but we do have the right to ask our Father to help and to send them with great power. This is war, folks. It's going on. Either the Bible is true or it's not. And we're assuming tonight that it's true.